Anton Shishkin, a bailiff from the Demetiev farm, exhausted by the sultry heat of the fir wood, and covered with spiders' webs and pine needles, made his way with his gun to the edge of the wood. His Damka, a mongrel between a yard dog and a setter, an extremely thin bitch, heavy with young, trailed after her master with her wet tail between her legs, doing all she could to avoid pricking her nose. It was a dull, overcast morning. Big drops dripped from the bracken and from the trees that were wrapped in a light mist. There was a pungent smell of decay from the dampness of the wood. There were birch trees ahead of him where the wood ended, and between their stems and branches he could see the misty distance. Beyond the birch trees, someone was playing on a shepherd's rustic pipe. The player produced no more than 5 or 6 notes, dragged them out languidly with no attempt at forming a tune. And yet there was something harsh and extremely dreary in the sound of the piping. As the copse became sparser and the pines were interspersed with young birch trees, Melton saw a herd. Hobbled horses, cows, and sheep were wandering among the bushes and, snapping the dry branches, sniffed at the herbage of the copse. A lean old shepherd, bare-headed, in a torn grey smock, stood leaning against the wet trunk of a birch tree. He stared at the ground, pondering something, and played his pipe. It seemed mechanically. "Good day, grandfather. God help you." Melton greeted him in a thin, husky voice, which seemed incongruous with his huge stature and big, fleshy face. "How cleverly you are playing your pipe. Whose herd are you minding?" "The Atramenovs, the shepherd," answered reluctantly, and he thrust the pipe into his bosom. "So I suppose the wood is the Atramenovs too?" Melton inquired, looking about him. "Yes, it is the Atramenovs. Only fancy, I had completely lost myself. I got my face scratched all over in the thicket." He sat down on the wet earth and began rolling up a bit of newspaper into a cigarette. Like his voice, everything about the man was small and out of keeping with his height, his breadth, and his fleshy face, his smiles, his eyes, his buttons, his tiny cap, which would hardly keep on his big, closely cropped head. When he talked and smiled there was something womanish, timid and meek about his puffy, shaven face and his whole figure. "What weather! God help us," he said, and he turned his head from side to side. "Folk have not carried the oats yet, and the rain seems as though it had been taken on for good. God bless it." The shepherd looked at the sky, from which a drizzling rain was falling, at the wood, at the bailiff's wet clothes, pondered, and said nothing. "The whole summer has been the same," sighed Melton. "A bad business for the peasants, and no pleasure for the gentry." The shepherd looked at the sky again, thought a moment, and said deliberately, as though chewing each word, "It's all going the same way. There is nothing good to be looked for." "How are things with you here?" Melton inquired, lighting his cigarette. "Haven't you seen any convoys of grouse in the Atramenovs' clearing?" The shepherd did not answer at once. He looked again at the sky, and to the right and left, thought a little, blinked. Apparently he attached no little significance to his words, and to increase their value tried to pronounce them with deliberation and a certain solemnity. The expression of his face had the sharpness and steadiness of old age, and the fact that his nose had a saddle-shaped depression across the middle, and his nostrils turned upwards, gave him a sly and sarcastic look. "No, I believe I haven't," he said. "Our huntsman, Erikamanaka, was saying that on Elias Day he started one convoy near Pushtoishai, but I dare say he was lying. There are very few birds." "Yes, brother, very few everywhere. The shooting here, if one is to look at it with common sense, is good for nothing and not worth having. There is no game at all, and what there is not worth dirtying your hands over. It is not full grown, it is such poor stuff that one is ashamed to look at it." Melton gave a laugh and waved his hands. "Things happen so queerly in this world that it's simply laughable, and nothing else. Birds nowadays have become so unaccountable. They sit late on their eggs, and there are some, I declare, that have not hatched them by St. Peter's Day." "It's all going the same," said the shepherd, turning his face upwards. "There was little game last year. This year there are fewer birds still, and in another 5 years, mark my words, there will be none at all. As far as I can see, there will soon be not only no game, but no birds at all." "Yes," Melton assented, after a moment's thought, "that's true." The shepherd gave a bitter smile and shook his head. "It's a wonder," he said, "what has become of them all. I remember 20 years ago there used to be geese here, and cranes and ducks and grouse, clouds and clouds of them. The gentry used to meet together for shooting, and one heard nothing but puff, 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 puff. There was no end to the woodcocks, the snipe, and the little teals, and the water snipe were as common as starlings, or let us say sparrows, lots and lots of them. And what has become of them all? We don't even see the birds of prey. The eagles, the hawks, and the owls have all gone. There are fewer of every sort of wild beast too. Nowadays, brother, even the wolf and the fox have grown rare, let alone the bear or the otter. And you know, in old days there were even elks. For 40 years I have been observing the works of God from year to year, and it is my opinion that everything is going the same way." "What way?" "To the bad, young man, to ruin, we must suppose. The time has come for God's world to perish." The old man put on his cap and began gazing at the sky. "It's a pity," he sighed, after a brief silence. "Oh God, what a pity! Of course, it is God's will. The world was not created by us, but yet it is a pity, brother. If a single tree withers away, or let us say a single cow dies, it makes one sorry, but what will it be, good man, if the whole world crumbles into dust? Such blessings, Lord Jesus. The sun and the sky and the forest and the rivers, and the creatures, all these have been created, adapted, and adjusted to one another. Each has been put to its appointed task and knows its place, and all that must perish. A mournful smile gleamed on the shepherd's face, and his eyelids quivered. "You say the world is perishing," said Melton, pondering. "It may be that the end of the world is near at hand, but you can't judge by the birds. I don't think the birds can be taken as a sign." "Not the birds only," said the shepherd. "It's the wild beasts too, and the cattle, and the bees, and the fish. If you don't believe me, ask the old people. Every old man will tell you that the fish are not at all what they used to be. In the seas, in the lakes, and in the rivers, there are fewer fish from year to year. In our Paschanka, I remember, pike used to be caught a yard long, and there were eel-pouts and roach and bream, and every fish had a presentable appearance. While nowadays, if you catch a wretched little piglet or a perch 6 inches long, you have to be thankful. There are not any gudgeon even worth talking about. Every year it is worse and worse, and in a little while there will be no fish at all. And take the rivers now. The rivers are drying up for sure." "It is true, they are drying up." "To be sure, that's what I say. Every year they are shallower and shallower, and there are not the deep holes there used to be. And do you see the bushes yonder?" the old man asked, pointing to one side. "Beyond them is an old riverbed. It's called a backwater. In my father's time the Paschanka flowed there. But now look, where have the evil spirits taken it to? It changes its course, and mind you, it will go on changing till such time it has dried up altogether. There used to be marshes and ponds beyond Kurgoza, and where are they now? And what has become of the streams? Here in this very wood we used to have a stream flowing, and such a stream that the peasants used to set creels in it and caught pike. Wild ducks used to spend the winter by it, and nowadays there is no water in it worth speaking of, even at the spring floods. Yes, brother, look where you will, things are bad everywhere. Everywhere." A silence followed. Melton sank into thought, with his eyes fixed on one spot. He wanted to think of some one part of nature as yet untouched by the all-embracing ruin. Spots of light glistened on the mist and the slanting streaks of rain as though an opaque glass, and immediately dried away again. It was the rising sun, trying to break through the clouds and peep at the earth. "Yes, the forests too," Melton muttered. "The forests too," the shepherd repeated. "They cut them down, and they catch fire, and they wither away, and no new ones are growing. Whatever does grow up is cut down at once. One day it shoots up, and the next it has to be cut down, and so on without end, till nothing's left. I have kept the herds of the commune ever since the time of freedom, good man. Before the time of freedom I was a shepherd of the master's herds. I have watched them in this very spot, and I can't remember a summer day in all my life that I have not been here. And all the time I have been observing the works of God. I have looked at them in my time till I know them, and it is my opinion that all things growing are on the decline. Whether you take the rye, or the vegetables, or flowers of any sort, they are all going the same way. But people have grown better, observed the bailiff. In what way better? Cleverer. Cleverer, maybe, that's true, young man, but what's the use of that? What earthly good is cleverness to people on the brink of ruin? One can perish without cleverness. What's the good of cleverness to a huntsman if there is no game? What I think is that God has given men brains and taken away their strength. People have grown weak, exceedingly weak. Take me, for instance. I am not worth a halfpenny. I am the humblest peasant in the whole village, and yet, young man, I have strength. Mind you, I am in my 70s, and I tend my herd day in and day out, and keep the night watch too, for 20 kopecks, and I don't sleep, and I don't feel the cold. My son is cleverer than I am, but put him in my place, and he would ask for a raise the next day, or would be going to the doctor's. There it is. I eat nothing but bread. For give us the day our daily bread. And my father ate nothing but bread, and my grandfather. But the peasants nowadays must have tea and vodka and white loaves, and must sleep from sunset to dawn. And he goes to the doctor and pampers himself in all sorts of ways. And why is it? He has grown weak. He has not the strength to endure. If he wants to stay awake, his eyes close. There is no doing anything. That's true, Melton agreed. The peasant is good for nothing nowadays. It's no good hiding what is wrong. We get worse from year to year. And if you take the gentry into consideration, they've grown feebler even more than the peasants have. The gentleman nowadays has mastered everything. He knows what he ought not to know, and what is the sense of it. It makes you feel pitiful to look at him. He is a thin, puny little fellow, like some Hungarian or Frenchman. There is no dignity, no air about him. It's only in name he is a gentleman. There is no place for him, poor dear, and nothing for him to do. And there is no making out what he wants. Either he sits with a hook catching fish, or he lolls on his back reading, or trots about among the peasants saying all sorts of things to them, and those that are hungry go in for being clerks. So he spends his life in vain, and he has no notion of doing something real or useful. The gentry in the old days were half of them generals, but nowadays they are a poor lot. They are badly off nowadays, said Melton. They are poorer because God has taken away their strength. You can't go against God. Melton stared at a fixed point again. After thinking a little, he heaved a sigh, as staid, reasonable people do sigh, shook his head and said, "And all because of what? We have sinned greatly. We have forgotten God. And it seems that the time has come for all to end. And, after all, the world can't last forever. It's time to know when to take leave." The shepherd sighed and, as though wishing to cut short an unpleasant conversation, he walked away from the birch tree and began silently reckoning over the cows. "Hey, hey, hey," he shouted. "Hey, hey, hey." bother you. The plague take you. The devil has taken you into the thicket. Toolulu. With an angry face, he went into the bushes to collect his herd. Melton got up and sauntered slowly along the edge of the wood. He looked at the ground at his feet and pondered. He still wanted to think of something which had not yet been touched by death. Patches of light crept upon the slanting streaks of rain again. They danced on the tops of trees and died away among the wet leaves. Damka found a hedgehog under a bush, and, wanting to attract her master's attention to it, barked and howled. "Do you have an eclipse or not?" the shepherd called from the bushes. "Yes, we had," answered Melton. "Ah, folks are complaining all about that there was one. It shows that there is disorder, even in the heavens. It's not for nothing. Hey, hey, hey." Driving his herd together onto the edge of the wood, the shepherd leaned against the birch tree, looked up at the sky, without haste took his pipe from his bosom, and began playing. As before, he played mechanically, and took no more than 5 or 6 notes, as though the pipe had come into his hands for the first time. The sounds floated from it, uncertainly, with no regularity, not blending into a tune, but to Melton, brooding on the destruction of the world, there was a sound in it of something very depressing and revolting, which he would much rather not have heard. The highest, shrillest notes, which quivered and broke, seemed to be weeping disconsolately, as though the pipe were sick and frightened, while the lowest notes, for some reason, reminded him of the mist, the dejected trees, the grey sky. Such music seemed in keeping with this weather, the old man and his sayings. Melton wanted to complain. He went up to the old man and, looking at his mournful, mocking face and at the pipe, muttered, "And life has grown worse, grandfather. It is utterly impossible to live. Bad crops, want, cattle plague continually, diseases of all sorts. We are crushed by poverty." The bailiff's puffy face turned crimson and took a dejected, womanish expression. He twirled his fingers as though seeking words to convey his vague feeling, and went on, "8 children, a wife, and my mother still living, and my whole salary 10 roubles a month, and to board myself. My wife has become a Satan from poverty. I go off drinking myself. I am sensible, steady man. I have education. I ought to sit at home in peace, but I stray about all day with my gun like a dog, because it is more than I can stand. My home is hateful to me." Feeling that his tongue was uttering something quite different from what he wanted to say, the bailiff waved his hand and said bitterly, "If the world's going to end, I wish it would make haste about it. There's no need to drag it out and make folks miserable for nothing." The old man took his pipe from his lips and, screwing up one eye, looked into its little opening. His face was sad and covered with thick drops like tears. He smiled and said, "It's a pity, my friend. My goodness, what a pity. The earth, the forest, the sky, the beasts of all sorts, all this has been created, you know, adapted. They all have their intelligence. It's all going to ruin. And, most of all, I am sorry for people." There was the sound in the wood of heavy rain coming nearer. Melton looked in the direction of the sound. did up all his buttons and said, "I am going to the village. Goodbye, grandfather. What is your name?" "Luca the Poor." "Well, goodbye, Luca. Thank you for your good words. Damka, Issy." After parting from the shepherd, Melitone made his way along the edge of the wood, and then downhill to a meadow which by degrees turned into a marsh. There was a squelch of water under his feet, and the rusty marsh sedge, still green and juicy, drooped down to the earth as though afraid of being trampled underfoot. Beyond the marsh, on the bank of the Peshtanka, of which the old man had spoken, stood a row of willows, and beyond the willows a barn looked dark blue in the mist. One could feel the approach of that miserable, utterly inevitable season, when the fields grow dark and the earth is muddy and cold, when the weeping willow seems still more mournful and tears trickle down its stem, and only the cranes fly away from the general misery, and even they, as though afraid of insulting dispirited nature by the expression of their happiness, fill the air with their mournful, dreary notes. Melitone plodded along by the river, and heard the sounds of the pipe gradually dying away behind him. He still wanted to complain. He looked dejectedly about him, and he felt insufferably sorry for the sky and the earth and the sun and the woods and his Damka. And when the highest drawn-out note of the pipe floated quivering in the air like a voice weeping, he felt extremely bitter and resentful of the impropriety in the conduct of nature. The high note quivered, broke off, and the pipe was silent.